The plane rolled away from the gate as storm clouds towered on the horizon, dark and heavy like mountains made of smoke. In seat 22C, a young woman sat quietly, dressed in a gray sweatshirt and jeans. No uniform, no medals, no indication of who she was. Just calm eyes and a dog-eared paperback resting in her hands. 3 rows behind her, 2 Navy officers were making sure the cabin knew they were aboard. Their laughter was too loud, their words chosen to carry. "Problem with commercial pilots these days," one of them announced, swirling ice in his plastic cup, "is half of them couldn't land a Cessna without GPS." His companion chuckled, leaning back smugly. "Don't get me started on Army aviation. Whole branch is full of mechanics who think tightening a bolt makes them pilots." The woman in 22C turned a page in her book. Her eyes flickered over complex diagrams of flight systems. The margins were filled with neat block-letter notes written in her own hand. She didn't flinch at the insult. Didn't even look up. But the pen that had been moving steadily across the page stopped. The jet lifted off, engines roaring as it pushed through the gray. The cabin settled into its usual long-haul rhythm, movies on screens, blankets pulled tight, tray tables rattling with drinks. Nothing unusual. Except for the voices behind her. By their second round of whiskey, the officers' jokes had sharpened. "I bet half this plane would swear they flew Blackhawks," the louder one sneered. "Most of them probably just changed oil on one during training." Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A businessman plugged in his earbuds. An elderly woman gave the men a disapproving look before burying herself in a magazine. But the officers weren't finished. "That quiet little thing up there," the louder one said, waving his cup vaguely in her direction, "probably tells people she was a pilot. You can always spot the wannabes. They stay silent, don't want to get called out." The cabin grew heavy with unease. A mother pulled her young son closer. The businessman beside her shifted further toward the aisle as though silence itself might be dangerous. Still, she didn't react. Her reflection in the window showed nothing but steady, unreadable eyes, eyes that had once stared down fire and chaos and known exactly what to do. "Would you like me to continue rewriting part 2 in the same style, picking up where the systems on the plane first start showing signs of failure?" For hours into the flight, most of the cabin was either lost in movies or asleep under thin airline blankets. The low, steady hum of the engines wrapped everything in a cocoon of routine. To most people, it was background noise. But not to her. She felt it before she heard it, a subtle hesitation in the port engine. Not a failure, not yet. Just the faintest irregular beat hidden beneath the steady drone. A rhythm you would never catch unless you had spent years listening to turbines under stress. Her palm pressed lightly against the cold plastic window. Through it, she could feel vibrations that didn't match what her ears told her. Something deeper was wrong. Then came the smell. It was faint, barely noticeable beneath the recycled air and cleaning chemicals. But she knew it instantly. The acrid tang of overheated wiring. She'd smelled it in a Chinook when the avionics panel started cooking itself mid-flight. She'd breathed it in an Apache limping home on backup systems after enemy fire had shredded its electronics. It was the smell of dying systems. The cabin lights flickered once, quick, barely noticeable. But she noticed. Her eyes moved across the overhead panel, then the vents, mapping exit points, noting passengers' positions, cataloging everything that might matter if things went sideways. Old habits never died. They waited. The intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice said, calm but rehearsed, "we're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. Nothing to be concerned about. As a precaution, please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened." Minor technical difficulties. She'd heard that phrase before. In combat zones, it usually came seconds before alarms screamed and things went very, very wrong. The businessman beside her stirred, blinking awake. "What's happening?" he asked groggily. She didn't answer. Her focus was on the sounds beneath the obvious ones, the way the airframe seemed to respond with micro-delays. Not turbulence. Not weather. Something deeper, something structural. The lights flickered again, longer this time. Enough for entertainment screens to flash off and back on. Passengers murmured nervously. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "What's wrong with the lights?" another voice asked. "I smell something burning." The faint panic was spreading now. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Not to panic. Not to demand answers from flight attendants who couldn't give them. She stood because 12 years of training had taught her one thing: when systems start failing, you don't wait. You prepare. 3 rows back, the Navy officers had finally stopped laughing. Their bravado cracked under the weight of reality. "Hey," the louder one called to a passing flight attendant, "what kind of technical difficulty is this? That smell, is it electrical?" The attendant smiled tightly, but her eyes betrayed her. "Please remain seated, sir. The flight crew is handling the situation." But the quick dart of her gaze toward the cockpit said more than words ever could. The woman in 22C watched, analyzing not just machines but people. That attendant was scared, trying to hide it. Which meant the crew was scared, too. And that meant this wasn't just minor. The third power surge plunged half the cabin into darkness. A baby wailed. Someone screamed. Passengers bolted upright, gripping armrests, voices rising in confusion and fear. The chemical tang of burning insulation was stronger now, unmistakable. The captain's voice returned, no longer hiding the edge in his tone. "Flight crew, prepare for possible emergency procedures." The words hung in the cabin like smoke. Panic spread, phones pulled out despite no signal, whispers turning to frantic questions. People realized, perhaps for the first time, that they were no longer in control of their fate. But she stayed calm. Not because she wasn't afraid, fear was natural. But because panic was a luxury she had never been able to afford. She'd been here before. Over Afghanistan, when an RPG had torn through their rotor hub. In Syria, when she'd flown a crippled bird back on one engine and half-dead avionics. Fear was just information. And right now, that information was telling her one thing: be ready. And then the cockpit door opened. The entire cabin went silent. Commercial cockpits did not open mid-flight unless something was very, very wrong. Passengers craned their necks to see. Flight attendants huddled by the galley, whispering. And in the doorway stood a man with close-cropped gray hair, his face lined with years of stress and sun. His airline uniform was neat, but above his silver wings gleamed a small gold trident, a SEAL insignia most passengers didn't recognize. His presence filled the narrow aisle. His voice cut through the silence. Every head in the cabin turned as the woman from seat 22C rose. She didn't move fast, didn't make a show of it. She simply stood, calm and deliberate, as if answering a question she'd been waiting for all her life. The SEAL captain's eyes locked onto hers immediately. His voice was clipped, all business. Background? Her voice was steady. Army aviation. Rotary wing first, then fixed wing testing. 5 combat deployments with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Most recent assignment, experimental platforms out of Fort Rucker. The words landed in the cabin like stones dropped into water. Shock rippled through the rows. Passengers stared at the woman they'd ignored for hours. The Navy officers behind her blinked, caught off guard. The SEAL captain didn't hesitate. "Flight status current?" "Yes, sir. I'm actually traveling for a technical consult on a UH-72 avionics package. And if your ECAM is showing cascade failures, I've troubleshot that configuration before, under fire." A flicker of recognition passed over his face. "Then you're coming with me." She stepped into the aisle. People shifted aside instinctively, some with awe, others with disbelief. The businessman who had sat beside her for 4 hours just stared, mouth slightly open, as if seeing her for the first time. One of the Navy officers finally found his voice. "Wait, she's not even in uniform. How do we know she's?" The captain spun, eyes sharp as a blade. "Chief Warrant Officer Avery Denning has logged over 2,000 combat flight hours. She flew extractions under blackout conditions. More importantly," his voice cut through the hush like steel, "she was the test pilot who identified this exact failure mode last year." He turned back to her. "That's right, Chief?" She met his gaze without flinching. "That's correct, sir." "Then let's go save some lives." The cockpit door shut behind them, leaving the cabin in stunned silence. Inside the firestorm. The cockpit was chaos. Warning lights glared red and amber across every panel. Alarms wailed in competing tones, each one demanding immediate attention. The acrid smell of scorched wiring was thicker here, mixed with sweat and heat. Captain Holden slid back into the left seat. His first officer, young, capable-looking, but pale with stress, was sweating through his collar, hands darting across checklists that offered no solutions. "Lieutenant Harris," Holden said, nodding toward the jump seat. "Meet Chief Warrant Officer Denning. She's our backup plan." Denning strapped in, tightening the harness across her chest. Her eyes swept across the panels, not reading one dial at a time but scanning for patterns, connections, signals hidden inside the noise. After only seconds, she spoke. "Your port engine temperature sensor's lying. It's showing thermal stress that isn't there. If you throttle back based on that, you'll kill the engine." Harris turned, confused. "How can you tell?" "Because I watched that engine from the cabin. The exhaust doesn't match these readings. And the vibration pattern is wrong for heat stress. This isn't mechanical, it's electrical interference." Holden's hand moved without hesitation, adjusting the throttle. The engine's rough rhythm smoothed out. Not perfect, but no longer failing. "Outstanding," Holden said. "What else?" She leaned forward, eyes flicking across hydraulic and pressure gauges. "Your leak isn't where the computer thinks it is. Crossfeed valve stuck partially open. It's bleeding pressure into the wrong circuit. Override through the auxiliary system, now." Holden's command was immediate. "Do it." Harris followed her instructions. Hydraulic pressure stabilized. Rudder control smoothed out. For the first time in nearly 20 minutes, the plane responded like it wanted to survive. Harris exhaled hard. "How did you?" "Because I patched this exact failure in a C-130 over the Hindu Kush," she cut in. "Different airframe, same physics. Metal and electrons don't care what patch is on the wing." Holden's lips tightened into something close to a smile. "Chief, you're not leaving this cockpit until we're on the ground." "Clear?" "Yes, sir." A battle against the sky. For the next hour, the cockpit became a war zone, one fought not with weapons but with knowledge and instinct. Denning recalibrated navigation sensors when electronics contradicted each other. She called out fuel imbalances before they became dangerous. She read the aircraft like a language, interpreting every vibration, every shudder of metal. Through the windscreen, storm clouds towered like mountains. Lightning flashed, painting their faces blue-white. Turbulence slammed them hard enough to make the plane groan like a wounded animal. But she guided them through it. Left engines unstable. Compensate with 2 degrees right. Feed auxiliary hydraulics, 15 minutes left before that valve seizes. Don't muscle the yoke, let her flex, she's built for this. Holden followed her lead, his hands light, working with the plane instead of against it. The massive jet steadied, battered but still flying. Finally, through a break in the storm, the Icelandic coast appeared. Runway lights flickered faintly through sheets of rain. Keflavik Air Base, Holden announced. Military runway. Crash crews on standby. Denning's jaw tightened. We'll make it. But it's going to be rough. The landing was violent. The aircraft slammed onto concrete, bouncing hard enough to lift everyone against their restraints. Smoke poured from the brakes. The jet shuddered, screamed, but held together. When it finally ground to a halt in the pouring rain, silence filled the cockpit. Then Holden shut down the engines with deliberate finality. In that sudden quiet, he turned to her. "Chief Warrant Officer," he said, voice carrying weight beyond protocol. "That landing goes in your logbook, too." She nodded once. Nothing more needed saying.